The fact that our protagonist in Ghost of Yotei is a female warrior with a ghost tail bent on revenge is something that might be a lot harder to pull off than we realize. Mount Yotei is also known as the Female Mountain. This mountain was seen by the Ainu people, the natural inhabitants of Ezo, as a living sacred mountain inhabited by a nurturing divine presence. But it had no ghost stories of vengeful spirits among the locals. In fact, there were no vengeful spirit stories to speak of at all. So how did the story of the Onryo, a Japanese folktale about a vengeful female ghost, come to the shores of Ezo? The Japanese didn't have a strong presence in the region of Ezo before the year 1603. They were mostly confined to trading outposts around the coast and mainly in the southern region. The Matsume clan was authorized by the leader of Japan to control trade with the Ainu and later gained a trade monopoly through military service to Hideyoshi and later to Tokugawa, the new shogun. With Tokugawa's shogunate in 1603, the Matsume clan were then formally recognized as the rulers of southern Ezo, giving us the premise for the presence of a Japanese folktale. Now we know that Sucker Punch took creative liberties to give us an impactful story, meaning that they won't necessarily be leaning hard into realism or accuracy when it comes to the events that will transpire, but they will remain respectful. They did this with Ghost of Tsushima, and despite their creative liberties, they managed to pay tribute and show heaps of respect for Japanese culture. They were widely praised in this regard, so it's fair to assume that they took the same approach with Ghost of Yotei. But you can't inject a Japanese folk legend into a civilization where they didn't exist in the first place. To do that, you'll need to get rid of the Ainu and replace them with Japanese inhabitants or limit their presence to almost non-existence. Luckily, we know that's not the case. Now you can say that Atsu is then part of the Ainu and her family was murdered by a Japanese gang known as the Yotei 6, giving her the motivation for revenge, which leads to her enemies, being Japanese, calling her the Onryo, problem solved. But the thing is, Atsu is not part of the Ainu. Ainu women typically wore tattoos around their face, particularly around the lips, but as you can see in this shot, her mother has a distinct lack of such markings, where this lady on the other hand does. On top of that, her father is handing her a sword, which wasn't the weapon of choice for the Ainu people, and the women in particular had no place wielding weapons. The women were expected to be wives and caretakers and so on. There is no record of Ainu women being fighters anywhere. Only in Japanese tradition did women in very rare cases wield weapons as warriors. And as I mentioned earlier, the Onryo is exclusively a Japanese folktale about a vengeful female spirit. And to enforce this idea further, her father was a swordsmith, an even rarer occurrence among the Ainu. Don't get me wrong, the Ainu had weapons, but they were mostly spears, bows, daggers, and so on, never swords. So following this train of thought, the Yotei 6 might then be an Ainu gang standing against the Japanese influence in Ezo. But this also doesn't work, because why then would the Ainu call Atsu an Onryo when it's not even something that they believe in? No, I believe that the Yotei 6 are indeed Japanese and that they take the place of the Matsume clan as mentioned earlier. Maybe they controlled the trade monopoly with the Ainu, and Atsu's father may have been a Japanese swordsmith trading with the Ainu because he saw how poorly they were being treated. The Ainu endured discrimination from Japan. They were exploited through trade by way of higher resource costs on their side or lower payment for their goods. Atsu's father may have been a rebel in a sense and moved his family north into Ezo, deep into Ainu territory, and tried helping the natives of the island by providing them with better weaponry with which they could defend themselves. And on finding out about this, the Yotei 6 took offense and murdered Atsu's entire family. We know for a fact that Atsu's family resided somewhere other than the southern region of Ezo, which would have been at the start of a very strong Japanese influence, because the developers mentioned that she traveled south and 16 years later returned home. But like I said, it's doubtful that they were part of the Ainu. Maybe she traveled south as a slave for a Japanese trader, or got taken there by someone who found her after her family was killed and then trained her to be a mercenary, or she just left and found sanctuary in an Ainu household. Regardless of her reasons for traveling south, it's clear that she is back to hunt her own people and in the same breath help the Ainu that are oppressed by Japanese warlords or mercenary leaders.
The soldiers needed more to free you. free us. Inokichi steals our crops while our families starve.
It's not a stretch to think that Sucker Punch pushed the Japanese influence in Ezo further beyond the southern borders, similar to the Mongol invasion from Tsushima, which would give the phrase "the people of Ezo call Atsu the Onryo" much more credibility, because the people of Ezo would also include a large number of Japanese citizens among the Ainu. So with all that being said, I'm going to take a wild swing here and see if I can predict the general direction of the story for Ghost of Yotei using the historical facts, Sucker Punch's reputation for being creative and respectful, and my own thinking process of how it could unfold. Keep in mind, all this is just me speculating and having some fun. None of it is based on actual information I got from Sucker Punch or any other source. Let me know down in the comments what you think. The Yotei 6 took to Ezo from mainland Japan to control the trade industry with the Ainu. Japan was busy with the civil war, so no one would notice their influence in Ezo. Atsu's family fled Japan because of safety concerns surrounding the civil war, and in order to earn their place, Atsu's father, a swordsmith, starts trading with the Ainu. Upon the arrival of the Yotei 6, Ainu resistance group starts forming, armed with Japanese steel by Atsu's father, in an attempt to push back the people who would seek to conquer and control them. The Yotei 6 finds out about this and kills Atsu's family, making a mistake by assuming her dead as well. Atsu is found by someone fleeing to the south into newly Japanese territory, or just outright goes back to the mainland, and there she is trained to use various weapons in a long-term revenge plan. In the year 1600, all war in Japan was at an end and the beginning of a new rule was being established. This brought peace and order to Japan, leaving mercenaries without work and bandits without opportunity. So they leave for Ezo and join the Yotei 6 in the control and oppression of the Ainu people. In the year 1603, a new shogunate is established and Atsu finally returns home, ready to start her quest for vengeance. But upon arrival, she finds out that the Yotei 6 has exerted control over every aspect of Ezo, and that it's now a land completely ruled by criminals and mercenaries, with the Ainu living as slaves or worse. This then puts her on a more complicated journey. As she hunts down the Yotei 6, she helps and liberates whoever she can, forming new alliances that eventually grows into the so-called Wolf Pack. With her conquest, she starts earning a reputation as the Onryo, a vengeful spirit. The Japanese inhabitants that occupy Ezo start fearing her, and the Yotei 6 place a hefty bounty on Atsu's head, hoping to capture or stop this newfound seemingly spectral threat. But as time goes on and Atsu liberates more and more of the Ainu, she gains a new reputation and her legend among the Ainu grows into something else entirely. Maybe someone in Ezo heard stories of a spirit who once liberated Tsushima from the Mongols. Maybe that story inspired them to hope. Hope that out there is the spirit of a liberator, a guardian of justice, a ghost, now known as the Ghost of Yotei. I had a lot of fun playing around with these theories. Like I said, all of it is just me speculating based on actual historical facts, but I might be way off the mark. Like I said, I just tried to predict the general story direction, the general outline, but if I went into specifics, I might humiliate myself even further. But if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing, as I'm going to take the same approach with the weapons and stance system that we've got coming up in Ghost of Yotei. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I really hope Yotei lives up to the hype, and I for one am confident that it will. Until next time, stay safe, and may God bless you all.